Please rise. July 20th, 2022 meeting of Haliburton County Council is now in session. Warden of this day is presiding.
Please be seated. Good morning, everyone. No warden's opening remarks today, but we do respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, please? Councilors Roberts and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the July 20th, 2022 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, I just should, as a note, just say that we have regrets from both Councillors DeVolen and Schalte. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of June the 22nd? Councillors Kennedy and Moffat, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the minutes from the June 22nd, 2022 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no business arising from the previous meeting, so we'll move right into our delegations. The first being Randy Peelsticker on behalf of Adventure Haliburton. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning. How is everyone today?
I think we're all pretty good. You want to go ahead with your presentation?
Great. I'd love to. Thank you. Again, my name is Randy Peelsticker. I do sit as the Vice President of the Adventure Haliburton Group, and I would like to thank the entire council for welcoming me back here again today to speak to you about the Driftscape initiative. And I'd also like to thank County Tourism for their support throughout the launch of this new marketing initiative for the tourism industry. We certainly could not have done this without the support of both council and county tourism. So thank you very much for that. Please go to the next slide. Thank you very much. So our 2021 strategic plan, and to be honest, our plan from the initiation of the Adventure Haliburton Group was always to position the Haliburton Highlands as being an opportunity to offer the best outdoor experiences throughout the entire province of Ontario. During 2020 and 2021, we had a lot of changes due to COVID in terms of what we as Adventure Haliburton were able to offer our customers and our clients. Things like trade shows, stuff like that was no longer an option for us to continue to market. So we needed to find new venues to keep our membership engaged and to keep the value for their membership. We wanted to move into something that was a digital marketing platform, as that is more modern than a lot of the more archaic or print material ads that have been happening in the past. Driftscape really attracted us because it has a lot of use in our surrounding areas, such as Fenelon Falls, Huntsville, Collingwood, and on the national setting, the Canadian heritage sites all use the Driftscape application. Our position was really for Adventure Haliburton to collaborate with county tourism and really provide the voice to help market the adventure tourism sector specifically. At the same time, our goal was to retain those customers and those tourists here in the county by engaging them in the other tourism resources beyond adventure tourism, including restaurant, accommodations, and other complementary services. Next slide, please. So just some stats on Driftscape itself. Again, one of the reasons we chose this product, there are other products out there on the market. We really chose Driftscape for several reasons. Number one, it is a homegrown product. It was conceived and developed right in Ontario in Waterloo. The other aspects we really liked about Driftscape was that it has no advertisements, no comments, no reviews. It's a very clean platform, and it reduces all the noise that you see in a lot of these other platforms. The other thing that really interested us was that we were able to get in on the ground floor. It was a relatively new product when we first jumped on board with them. And they really tend to accommodate to the needs of their customers. And we've developed a very great working relationship with Driftscape over the last year and a half or so. So to run through some of these stats, again, in February 21, they had 30,000 subscribers. By June 22, they had almost doubled their subscribers to nearly 60,000. 45,000 of those are using the mobile app. 14,000 of those are using the web-based version of Driftscape, and 12,000 subscribers visited on Ontario within the last 120 days. So that's just an indication of our spring season. Next slide, please. So moving forward, our strategic plan for 2022, we really want to take the digital footprint that we have created for Haliburton County, and we want to take it to the next level. Part of the challenge is that our budget was not really designed for the long-term development of this product. And there are many features that we are not taking advantage of yet. We have created the basic digital footprint. We've got POIs on the map. The information is populated. The site is functioning, but we really want to take it to the next level. Gamify tourism is one of the functions that we have not yet to employ. We are in the development stage of working on our first tours and quests. The first two tours that we are developing were a walking tour of the town of Haliburton and the town of Minden. We do have a couple other on the back burner as well. But tours are really themed events that have a multitude of different stopping points that can all have their own different information. Whereas quests are more of a digital scavenger hunt, where our customers and our tourists are going around trying to collect different locations as they travel through Haliburton County. There are also other applications that we see having a great future potential to employ Driftscape to help some of the other aspects of tourism here in Haliburton County. One of the aspects of Driftscape that we are not yet using effectively is the event side of things. So we have places and things to do, but the event side of things is a whole other layer that we have not delved into at this point. Applications, again, for something as simple as music in the park. More elaborate applications would be to provide navigational assistance for events like the Hike Haliburton Festival or even the studio tour. Again, with the map-based software, it would be very good for the navigational side of things. And I know after being involved in the Hike Haliburton Festival myself, that navigation is one of the big challenges. So there are some other things that we could use this application for beyond just marketing the POIs that are already on the map. Beyond that, we believe that we need to really focus on a new promotional campaign. That's not just through our digital marketing networks, such as social media, website, and etc. But we also want to focus on some new print materials and some different stuff to really get this application in the hands of the tourists when they come to Haliburton County. Could I have the next slide, please? So our proposal is a partnership between Adventure Haliburton and County Tourism. It would be a 50-50 partnership we would be looking for a contribution of $5,000 from county, and Adventure Haliburton would also be contributing an equal $5,000 to make the partnership, straight down the middle. In terms of the delineation as to where those funds would be going, Adventure Haliburton would maintain the development of the site, of the content, and the marketing and promotion of it. What we'd be looking for from county is to help us cover the actual annual subscription fee for Driftscape, and that is, I believe, just shy of $4,800. Next slide, please. So our funding request, again, as I had mentioned previously, since we've taken on the project, it really has grown and much further beyond the initial launch that we had anticipated. The challenge is that Adventure Haliburton is a not-for-profit group, and we are run by volunteers, and we do not have the budget to continue to develop this software program, this marketing platform, to try to really take full advantage of it. And that's where we're looking for your help. The value of Driftscape has become quite evident in terms of the data and the analytics that it can provide for us. And at the same time, we are doing great things to really populate that digital platform, keeping our tourists engaged and providing great content, up-to-date content from all of the different tourism stakeholders within the county. So our proposal is to enter a memorandum of understanding with county for a period of 3 years, beginning this year in 2022. We would be looking for the county to support us with the $5,000 annually for the next 3 years to cover that Driftscape subscription. And again, Adventure Haliburton Group will contribute a matching $5,000 annually to cover the content development, marketing, and different aspects as such. Next slide, please. So our commitments, again, we have lots of data that is coming through from Driftscape. We want to be able to share that with county on an annual basis. And a big part of this is that information is going to help inform the decision-making process of county tourism. It's going to help analyze trends. It's going to help analyze target markets. It's going to analyze markets that we need to offer extra support to. The key performance indicators, or KPIs, that we are working with Driftscape continue to develop. We do have some that are happening at this point. There are some challenges in terms of privacy policies, and a lot of people are also very keen on geolocation data. Again, we want to maintain the privacy policies of Driftscape. We think that really shows the integrity of the product. And as for the geo data, the tracking location information, that's a little bit out of our control because it really depends on whether the user of Driftscape, the actual tourist, has turned that function on their mobile device. So we hope that we can make this a collaborative partnership between Adventure Haliburton and County Tourism, where we share not just the analytics from Driftscape itself, but we would also like to share analytics from our own social media, marketing, website campaigns as well. And we're hoping that that can be a two-way street, that County Tourism is also going to share this information with us. And, you know, the final product of that may be an annual report that we can share with all tourism stakeholders to help them, again, make better informed decisions on their own individual marketing campaigns for their own individual businesses. Beyond that, again, Adventure Haliburton is willing to maintain up to 15 points of interest belonging to the municipality. Those would include the visitor centers, the museum, places like the log chute, and different tourism infrastructure that is managed and maintained by the county rather than private individuals. Again, in final here, one of the new initiatives that we are launching, we have been using a QR code, but it was a free QR code. We have just recently developed a new QR code, which is again an annual paid subscription that is going to provide us with more data in terms of where our customers are actually downloading this from. There will still be some discrepancies if people just go onto the website and download it directly. We will not be able to track that data specifically, but for our individual marketing campaign for Driftscape that is using this new QR code, it will give us direct insights as to the success for where people are downloading it from, and again will help us make better informed decisions on the go forward to help us continue to promote and market this incredible digital platform for Haliburton County. So I'm trying to keep my presentation brief today. I know that I've spoken to you guys before in great depths about Driftscape, but I would really like to open the floor for questions at this point to the council, and hopefully I can answer anything you might need to know.
Thanks, Randy. It does sound like the strategy that you developed for 2021 was successful from the numbers that you've given us, and your strategy going forward, it's got some pretty exciting ideas that I think could probably work well for us all. I do have a couple of questions, but I'll go to the floor first and see what questions members of County Council have got. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. So yeah, great idea. And I haven't gone on the Driftscape app myself, but I like what you said, that there aren't ads and there aren't all these pop-ups, because that is so annoying when you find sites like that. So obviously their funding model is from the from people like Adventure Haliburton subscribing, and because the app is free, I believe, right, to download.
That is correct. So anyone who uses the Driftscape app, it's free to download, it's free to use. Driftscape sources its revenue through the subscription fee of organizations like Adventure Haliburton. In many other places, it's more like municipalities that are providing that funding to them.
Right. So just my question really is not necessarily to you, Randy, is just back to, we don't have any staff with a sort of staff report. I don't know financially where we're at or what the staff feel the value is. And just committing for 3 years when this is our last term and we're already in the budget. So where would the 5,000, we were to commit for at least 2022, where would the funding come from? So I just would have liked to hear from staff before I make a decision.
Thanks for raising that. That would be one of the things that I would have asked for was some position from the staff, as well as a concern about the funding aspect. We can talk about 2022, but I don't think that we can commit money for the 3-year period, which is a bit of the timing is not great. I would go to Councillor Rao.
Yeah, Randy, I was going to ask you, you talk about an annual report, which I don't have a problem with, but can I ask the question why we could not? Because I would assume this information is online and is capable of being collected by your group. Would you be open to a semi-annual or quarterly report? Because that would give our tourism department a better opportunity to deal with what is happening and coming down the road, as opposed to waiting till the end of the year and trying to correct things then. Just a question.
I think that's a very reasonable request, and I don't see why we couldn't do that. We are sort of working on an annual basis for our own reporting, but if it is valuable to you guys to have something on a quarterly basis, I'm sure we could accommodate that.
Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Generally, I'm very supportive of this project, and the concerns have been brought forward by Councillor Roberts and Warden Danielson. Budgets, timing, that kind of thing. But I'd really like to see a staff report on what the merits are of us contributing $5,000. Basically, are we getting just the subscription coverage? And I noticed later on we have a report from our economic development that we were successful in getting an auto grant from the Regional Tourism Relief Fund, and 25,000 of that is for marketing. And if this might fit into a 2022 component of that, I'm not sure what the structure of that is, since our budgets for 2022 are already set, so it's going to be hard to find an extra 5. But again, I think we need a staff follow-up report on this, and hopefully we can make a deal.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Yeah, I also agree. I mean, when we saw this last year, I think there was general support. I did pull up my notes from last year, and we talked about the fact that, or I talked about the fact that we don't give money. We invest in opportunities that advance the My Haliburton Highlands brand. And as part of that, I think my question was, what would that look like? And also from my notes, it looks like I said that I'd like to support it on a one-off to see how it goes, and with a written explanation of what the branding advancement would be, which is the partnership aspect of it, which I think is what Councillor Ryall has just spoken to, is, you know, what are we going to get for it? We have to make sure that there's a tangible or reasonable outcome from the relationship. In terms of the municipal points of interest, I do have Driftscape on my phone, and just as one example, of course, naturally, I went straight to the log chute site, and we need to talk about that. It's not linking to the right place. It doesn't have the information that the museum folks would probably want. And so I think going forward with whatever arrangement we work out, that there needs to be a really specific means by which the information is provided and then reviewed by the providers to make sure that it is a viable and successful relationship. So I don't think anybody wants someone else describing their park or and I know it's probably taken off websites, but there's probably a character count. I know I'm getting into the weeds here. The slide, one of your last slides said that the township's 15 points must represent an activity and be not for profit. What is currently on the Driftscape site includes, sculpture. I think I'm in the Haliburton section, or Haliburton Snowmobile Association, Log Chute, Sculpture Forest, Museum, Outdoors Association. But there's also a lot of accommodators on there. So accommodators aren't, I hope maybe our accommodators are adventures in and of themselves. But I'm wondering if your Adventure Haliburton, and this is meant to draw people to adventurous things to do based on the mandate of the organization, then, and I'm not trying to disrespect the accommodators, but they're already listed elsewhere. So what then makes Driftscape different and more unique than the existing county site, other than it's in your hand? And I'm not looking for an answer. These are some of my sort of questions about what I'd be looking for in a relationship, because I think there is value in it. And also, we just talked briefly about this prior to the meeting started on a completely different issue, but, County Council some time ago, this is why the corporate history is so important, is we did, over a period of 3 years, wean off of county money 3 organizations that are of tremendous value. The last one remaining is the Outdoors Association, which the money to support that was transferred back to as a tourism contribution. Again, it was meant to have it was meant to be for branding opportunities, and we did take some flack for that. And I think the Outdoors Association is busy with the fish, and so that also sometimes needs to be reorganized. But because we went through that years ago, and we don't give money, we just had this conversation at the last meeting about the ULinks project, I would like, again, perhaps in a staff report, to look at this relationship on a more fee-for-service structure, because then there can be a contract and a guaranteed outcome from both parties for everyone's best interest. Because we can't have spent in one iteration of council, spent so much time weaning good organizations doing good things off of county dollars just to clean the slate and then start doing it all over again. We need to look at a different focus. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here. I would like to see it structured differently with specific outcomes on both sides, just so that everybody gets what they need. And I'd like to hear from staff about it too. And I probably talked too long, but that's it.
No, I mean, you raised some very good points, and I'm sure there are concerns of all of us. So I think what you're hearing, Randy, is that we're going to defer just pending a staff report. And I'm assuming that you can have conversations, with our staff in the interim, and we'll bring this back to the next council meeting, as well as dealing with how we can structure the financial contribution should we decide to make it, given the position that we're in, that it's unbudgeted money, that we're, about to go into lame duck, and we can address all those things at that time. Does that sound reasonable to everyone? Could I have then a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillors Roberts and Burton.
So I have added some words directing staff to do a report. Did you want me to read that?
If
first?
you would read the resolution, that would be
So-
great.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the delegation from Randy Peelsticker on behalf of the Adventure Haliburton Group, and that staff be directed to prepare a report outlining funding sources and benefits of the purchase of service collaboration with a recommendation on participation.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much, Randy. Look forward to discussing this further with you.
Thank you very much to everyone on the council, and please enjoy your day.
And you. So next up, we have Peter Simcisco, who's the managing partner of Watson and Associates, to talk to us about development charges and community benefit charges. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, good morning. So I
You
think
want to
we'll
move
have,
right into your presentation?
I think so. I think we'll have some slides to put up. Wonderful. Thank you very much for putting the slides up. So I'll start here. Again, good morning, everyone. It's very much a pleasure to be here this morning. As you might be aware, Watson and Associates have been retained by the county and the 4 local municipalities to undertake a development charges background study and also a feasibility assessment for the imposition of community benefit charges. The purpose of the presentation this morning is to introduce the purpose of the respective charges and also to speak a little bit about the process that we will be following and then the timeline of the project as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. So firstly, development charges are a discretionary tool that is available to municipalities to help recover the capital costs associated with residential and non-residential growth within the municipality. Similarly, community benefits charges are also a discretionary tool to recover the capital costs due to development. However, in contrast to development charges, the community benefits charges only apply to high density residential development. And I will come back to that in a little bit more detail shortly. The capital costs that can be recovered through these mechanisms are in addition to what cost would normally be constructed as part of a subdivision. So for example, any internal roads, water mains, roads or sidewalks, etc., that might be direct developer responsibility. There are 2 pieces of legislation that govern these 2 cost recovery mechanisms. In the case of development charges, municipalities are empowered to impose those under the Development Charges Act. And in terms of the community benefits charges, those are a newer mechanism which was introduced through recent amendments to the Planning Act. We can go over to the next slide, please. We have an illustration that summarizes the methodology that's followed in establishing development charges. And this is a methodology that must be followed under the Development Charges Act, as the Act is quite prescriptive in terms of the steps that must be followed. And so just going through this illustration at a high level, the methodology commences by looking at the anticipated amount of development as the background study that we need to produce through this process must identify the amount as well as the type and the location of anticipated growth. Having established the growth forecast, we then have to establish the services that can be included, as well as the anticipated increase in need for service that would result from that anticipated growth. And we're doing so on a service by service basis. And so, for example, in some cases, this could entail looking at the available water treatment or storage capacity, and then determining how much additional capacity would be required to accommodate the anticipated population and employment growth. Very importantly, that increase in need for service has to be measured relative to the historical level of service that has been provided within the municipality over the past 10 years. to ensure that the level of service is not being increased relative to that 10-year average. In other words, so that we're not asking future development, future growth to pay for an increase in the level of service. Really, the purpose of these mechanisms is to help municipalities recover the costs associated with maintaining a level of service in light of that growth. So next, we give consideration to specific capital projects that would need to be undertaken to provide the required service expansions, the cost estimates associated with those projects, and then what share of them will be funded from development charges. Moving down the illustration towards the yellow boxes, about midway down the slide, there are a number of deductions that have to be considered against those capital cost estimates, most notably where a project will benefit the existing population, then that share of the project costs must be funded from another source outside of development charges. Similarly, if there are any grants, subsidies, or other external contributions available to help fund a portion of the project, typically there will be an apportionment of those and would be reflected as a deduction against the development charge needs. In addition to the capital costs, we also have the ability to include financing costs. So interest charges, for example, where applicable, if there are any growth-related needs that will be financed through debt, for example. And then the net costs, the resultant net costs are allocated between residential and non-residential benefit. And if we can go over to the next slide, just to illustrate, once we have the total cost determined that could possibly be recovered through development charges, we are then apportioning those or allocating them between residential and non-residential benefit, and then dividing that by the respective growth to calculate the development charge. And so typically, the residential charges are expressed as a charge per dwelling unit with different charges for single detached homes versus apartment units, for example. And in terms of non-residential charges, we would take the net capital costs and divide them by the anticipated amount of non-residential development or gross floor area to come up with a charge per square foot or per square meter of building gross floor area. We can go to the next slide, please. Then there are also several, so once we have calculated the potential development charges that could be imposed, there are several policy considerations that we will need to address through this process, which mainly relate to how the charges will be administered. So firstly, looking at when will development charges be calculated for a particular type of development and when will they be payable. The default for most types of development is that development charges are calculated and paid at the time of building permit issuance. However, with some of the recent amendments to the Development Charges Act, there are some types of development that will now pay development charges over several annual installment payments. And then furthermore, for certain types of development, the rates they pay get frozen at the rates that were in effect when the planning application was submitted for any developments that proceed through a site plan or a zoning bylaw amendment application. Then we're also looking at exemptions. The Development Charges Act provides certain statutory exemptions for things like industrial building expansions, for some types of residential intensification, as well as for government and school board entities and universities. So those are statutory exemptions that have to be observed by every municipality. But then municipalities also have the ability to exempt other types of developments or, for example, development within certain areas of a municipality from the payment of development charges. And that's done through discretionary exemption policies. We then also look at redevelopment or conversion credits. Typically, these are recognized in instances where a building is being demolished and replaced, or where there is a conversion of a building from one use to another. We look at development charge annual indexation policies. So typically, development charges are indexed on an annual basis to keep pace with inflationary pressures. And this can be done on an automatic basis or subject to council approval each year. We're then also looking at establishing a local service policy to establish clear rules for what is to be direct developer responsibility versus what will be included in the development charge. And then finally, we're also looking at various transition policies. So sometimes municipalities opt to phase in the charge, for example, to help with the transition, especially when there is a large increase, for example. So on the next slide, to speak a little bit about the community benefits charges component. So previously or historically, municipalities were able to enter into agreements to authorize increases in permitted height or density in return for community benefits. The recent amendments to the Planning Act, which were brought about by the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act, have introduced a more formal mechanism, which we refer to as the community benefits charge. Local or single-tier municipalities can impose a community benefits charge. It is done through bylaw, and the purpose of the community benefits charge would be to pay for the capital costs of facilities, services, or other matters required due to development. Before passing a community benefits charge bylaw, the municipality needs to prepare a strategy, which in many ways would be similar to a development charges background study, as described previously, with similar considerations. On the next slide then, as part of the process of implementing a community benefits charge, a municipality must consult with such persons or public bodies as the municipality considers appropriate. And there is an important limitation. So in addition to the limitation of community benefits charges only being able to be imposed by local or single-tier municipalities, so they wouldn't be applicable for the county itself. Another limitation is that community benefit charges may only be imposed on buildings or structures with at least 5 stories and containing at least 10 residential dwelling units. So again, the focus really is with the community benefits charge on higher density residential developments. There is also a prescribed maximum rate, and with that, community benefit charges cannot exceed 4% of the property's land value prior to the day of building permit issuance. And then similar to the Development Charges Act, there are certain types of developments that are statutorily exempt from the payment of community benefit charges. On the next slide then, so with respect to the potential for imposing community benefit charges, we have done a very high level assessment at this point by looking at the county's official plan. And the current official plan identifies the potential for higher density residential development in 2 of the local municipalities, specifically within Haliburton Village in Dysart and within Minden Village in Minden Hills. And so as a result, we will do a further evaluation of the feasibility of potentially implementing community benefits charges for those 2 municipalities. And again, the feasibility assessment will be focused on determining how much development there may be that would qualify for the payment of community benefit charges, and also looking at whether there are growth-related costs that the municipalities wouldn't be able to recover through the development charges, which instead may need to be recovered through the community benefit charge mechanism instead. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the work plan and based on the timeline that has been prepared for this assignment, we are anticipating to have the draft findings, including the calculated rates and some draft policies, ready by early to mid-September. And once those draft findings have been reviewed with staff from each municipality, we would undertake a stakeholder consultation with representatives of the development industry. At this point, we have commenced working with staff from each of the municipalities to identify the services for potential inclusion in this assessment, and also starting to get a preliminary understanding of the various background documents that may be available to identify future growth-related needs. In accordance with the Development Charges Act, and I'm going to move a little bit from the right-hand side of the illustration here, prior to council considering passage of a development charges bylaw, the background study must be available publicly on a municipality's website at least 60 days prior to that date. Furthermore, council must hold at least 1 public meeting, and that public meeting needs to take place no earlier than 2 weeks after the background study was released. So somewhere between the release of the background study and council considering passage of a development charges bylaw, there needs to be this public meeting. And really the purpose of that public meeting is to provide for a review of the development charges study and to receive public input on the proposed policies and charges. and anyone that's in attendance from the public can make representations regarding the proposed bylaw at that point in time. The current plan has the public meetings occurring in mid to late October. Public meetings in plural, because there would need to be one separately for each, for both the county as well as each local municipality. And we will be working with staff to further refine that timing to ensure that it aligns with the upcoming municipal elections. Ultimately, we would expect that county council, as well as the councils of the 4 local municipalities, would be in a position to consider approval of the respective development charge bylaws by late November. And then just one final note, if a development charges bylaw is ultimately put in place, it would be in effect for a maximum of 5 years, at which point a new development charges study would need to be undertaken, and then a new development charges bylaw would be passed. So the maximum shelf life of a development charges bylaw is 5 years. So that concludes the overview of this project that we have commenced working on with staff, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have about these development charges or community benefit charges, or the overall process that we will be following.
Thanks very much, Peter, for your introduction to the project and for outlining your schedule and how that might work for us. I would look to questions from council about the presentation. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. I have a comment and then a question. And the comment is that I don't know about Minden, but Dysart has a height restriction of 4 stories. And we likely will never go past that because due to firefighting capabilities, we do not have ladder trucks that could reach past that, even though with building codes and sprinkler systems and all of that, it would be extremely unlikely in the future that Dysart would approve anything greater than 4 stories. So in terms of the community benefit charge and the feasibility study for that, I would recommend that we don't entertain that. There aren't Minden Hills councillors to respond to that. That'd be easy to find out what their height restrictions are. And I know that they have similar fire vehicles as us. So that's just a comment. And then the question is, how do things get calculated? I'm familiar with site plan agreements. I've entertained quite a few and on large developments in Dysart, and they're usually a little push-pull back and forth, negotiating. The developer says, you know, this is what I calculate the cost. We get those peer reviewed, etc. We hold securities for those, mind you. It's not real dollars like this development charges. But who does the calculation? So we don't have staff to do that. If a development comes forward and it's a, 8,000 square foot store and whatnot, then do the developers propose this is, or does Dysart or the county, or how does that work for the calculation of the development charge?
Yes, thank you for the question. So it is a little bit simpler. I appreciate the complexities, specifically with the site plan agreements and the back and forth around the value of the works that's being put in place. Development charges typically are imposed based for residential development based on the number of units. So it's a set charge by different types of units. So depending on how many units are being constructed, that charge is just applied to the number of units. Similarly, for non-residential development, the charges apply to the amount of gross floor area that's being constructed. So it's related to the physical characteristics of the development, which is much easier to determine than the value of works. And typically the responsibility for calculating the development charge payable would be with the building department. So as the applicant is coming forward for a building permit, that's when the charges are calculated.
You have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just follow up. So that's similar to, we do have sewer system. We do not have a water system, but we do have a sewer system. And we right now have a flat rate calculation for, we call it equivalent residential unit, an ERU. And if it's one house, it's one. Is sometimes in some multi-residential settings like a retirement home, for example, where they don't have full laundry and whatnot, there's a different calculation, or a student residence, we have a slightly different calculation. So I understand. So we do have that ERU. How would the 2 municipalities that does Highlands East have a sewer system as well? Water. water. How would the development charge work when the municipality of Dysart, for instance, already has that sewer system hookup? Is that stay separate?
That will certainly be part of the assessment, is whether it would make sense to bring that charge, that connection fee, effectively under the development charges bylaw and mechanism, or whether it makes more sense to keep that separate and through the development charge only look at other service expansion needs outside of wastewater.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warden. Through to Peter. Peter, you had said about implementation of the CBC for Dysart and Minden Hills, and I was just wondering where that would leave the other two municipalities.
So that was just, thank you for the question. That was just based on a very high level assessment, preliminary assessment, I'll say, by looking at the county's official plan policies and seeing where there's the potential for this higher density residential development that would qualify for the payment of the community benefits charge. So in this case, because there might be relatively limited opportunities for that type of development that would pay community benefits charges, what we have proposed to do is a feasibility assessment of that. So we're not diving right into a full-blown background study or strategy for the community benefits charge if it wouldn't appear that there is going to be the type of development that would ultimately pay that charge. Whereas with the development charge mechanism, we know that that's a much broader mechanism, and it doesn't just apply to high density residential development. So we are undertaking a full background study right from the get-go. So it's a feasibility assessment. We will look more closely at each of the local municipalities to see if there would appear to be some potential for a more detailed assessment of the community benefits charge. I was just indicating that at this stage, just based on a very high level assessment, there would appear to be limited opportunities for that.
Councillor Rao.
Yeah, my question is more related to the development charges. And I don't know anything about development charges anywhere else, so I'm pleading total ignorance here, as many of the people that I represent that don't have a good understanding either. We have a lot of properties that are on private roads, many of which are retrofits. That is to say, they're reconditioning grandpa's house, which means it could be either just an upgrade of major consequence requiring a building permit, or it could be a tear down and a rebuild. There are also a small number of properties on those similar private roads that would be new builds. My question is, would the development charges apply to them as well?
So it will ultimately come down to the policies for how the development charges bylaw would be administered. So firstly, generally speaking, without any exemption policies, the development charge would apply on a municipal-wide basis to any type of new development. To the extent that there's just an alteration or a renovation happening, typically that would not trigger development charges. Similarly, if it's a redevelopment of someone demolishing an existing house and building a new one, we would recognize development charge credits to recognize that there was some previously existing service capacity related to the original house that's just all being replaced, or the new house is taking place of that. To the extent that there's new development on those private roads, they could be eligible to pay development charges, and that could be because they are creating service. They are creating service capacity, or they're requiring service capacity in areas outside of that private road. So there are other municipal roads that they are using to get to that private road. For example, there could be other services that they're utilizing, such as parks and recreation. They might be utilizing the library services. So any service that's included in the development charge, that new development might have additional demands on those services. That being said, by policy, a municipality can certainly decide to exempt certain types of development entirely, or it could be based on location. Just one small example of that is if some communities have downtown areas or community improvement plans or other areas that are deemed important where they want to incentivize development and maybe reduce or entirely eliminate development charges. So the exemption policies are quite flexible, And that is something that we will be exploring in detail. Once we understand what the calculated charges would be, then we will get into the discussion of policies and whether certain types or areas should be exempt from the payment of those development charges.
Go ahead, Councillor Rao.
So could there be technically a slightly different charge for someone that's on a private road that's in a more remote area as opposed to someone who is in a more developed residential area?
There could be, yes.
Are there other questions? Councillor Moffat.
My comment or inquiry is similar to Councillor Rael's because our two communities are quite similar. As I've always referred to Algonquin Highlands as a giant park, but we are seeing in the census data quite a substantial increase, and it is people moving here, seasonal property owners who are either moving here full time, or as Councillor Rael has said, people who are seasonal people tearing down the building and moving here full time, and there has to be some advantage for us in that, because it doesn't appear on its face that there's very little benefit to a place like Algonquin Highlands. But I'm glad to hear that those specific policies may allow for the capture of something, because if somebody is a current property owner and they pay their annual taxes and then they move up, which we're seeing at a tremendous rate now since COVID, we already have their tax dollars for their property, but now they're going to the landfill more, using the roads more, using the library more, using all those services more and more and more. And so, there's always a great hue and cry about increases in taxes. And so there has to be some way by which to offset some of those increased usages. And so I guess the bottom line is I'm glad to hear that there's room for that to be discussed. Otherwise, it wouldn't appear with the kind of development that's happening in a place like Algonquin Highlands. There wouldn't be much benefit for us, I don't think. But anyway, thank you. It took me a long time to get to that because I couldn't quite figure it out. It felt very much like two trains left the station at the beginning, and I caught up at the end. Anyway, I look forward to the outcome.
Other questions? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just lastly, in the consultation process, it says with such persons and public bodies as the municipality considers appropriate. So will it be our staff, or do you want council input and to make sure you capture who we feel are the appropriate people to talk to? Chamber of Commerce, Haliburton Home Builders Association, will it be our staff that leads that, or should we be, I just named two of organizations anyway, not individuals. So who will be leading that?
So that specific requirement pertains to the community benefits charge strategy, which may not ultimately be undertaken. We're doing the feasibility assessment at this stage, but similarly for the development charges component, we are looking to consult with stakeholders. There is a public meeting that is required under the Development Charges Act. What we have proposed to do is to, even ahead of that formal public meeting, is to have a meeting with, for example, the Home Builders Association to explain the process, explain the changes that are being proposed, and to get their input and any concerns that they might have, just so that we can make sure that that can be addressed prior to bringing a more formal recommendations in the public meeting.
So we're going to be hearing quite a bit about this as we're moving forward, and I would look to council to be able to have a look at the list of stakeholders that you're considering talking to, and just to see if we've got anybody that we see appropriate to add. Any other comments or questions? Thanks very much, Peter. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillors Kennedy and Rael.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 20th presentation from Watson and Associates Economists Limited, entitled Haliburton County and Area Municipalities Development Charges Background Study and Community Benefit Charges Feasibility.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no need for approval of reports and recommendations from Committee of the Whole. I don't believe that we have anything from accessibility. Now we do have to break into closed in about 5 minutes. So I think maybe what we'll do is move into receiving the planning department update, and then call a break and hear Corey's presentation about climate change after the closed session. That's all right with everyone. So we can bring Steve in to give us his planning department update. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Warden and rest of council. So this is the Planning Department Standard Report. Just a couple highlights. You'll see the reference to the legal peer review. That actually has been completed, and staff had a fulsome discussion about it on Monday. And also to the short-term rental project, both those projects will be presented again for council's consideration and discussion at a special meeting in August. So we'll have some further updates on those projects at that time. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions about the planning department update? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Burton and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report entitled Planning Department Update for Information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing more about the big projects. Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to go into closed session? Councillor Roberts, Councillor Burton. All in favor? That's carried. So we're good to go? Welcome back to the open session of council. Welcome back to the open session of council. And next item on the agenda is a report from Corey on climate change engagement results. Look forward to hearing the results of your work.
Thank you. Good morning, Warden and members of council. So this report outlines the results of the county's first climate action engagement, which was live from May 6th until May 30th. The purpose of this engagement was to gain insight from the local community on opportunities, barriers, and priorities in regards to climate action. Staff conducted a variety of outreach methods to raise awareness of this engagement, ranging from newspaper, radio, and social media ads, to attending farmers markets, to partnering with the Youth Hub and the library. There were 431 participants, mostly through online responses, but also through paper copies. The takeaways from this engagement will be incorporated into the Community Climate Action Plan, and community engagement remains ongoing with stakeholder interviews happening over July and August, and a second survey that's planned for the fall. So happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thanks, Corey. I know that surveys are subject to who's responding to them and maybe sometimes how many times they're responding. I found it interesting to see the correlation between the results on this climate change survey and the information that we've been looking at for shoreline preservation. That there seem to be some pretty strong similarities there. Councillor Rao.
The other thing I found just surprising was the age breakdown. Predominantly, it's old people like me that have actually done some responding. I was quite shocked that not as many of the younger people had corresponded. It was just kind of interesting.
Councillor Roberts.
Thanks. Corey, I just have one question. On page 4 of the reports of participation, it says, so we know that there was 431 participants, but what's 1,592 visitors? What's that?
I think that would be the number of people that viewed the web page. So maybe people clicked the link to look at the engagement, but opted not to fill it out.
That's surprising, but thank you for that.
It is interesting to see the spread in the numbers. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Yeah, I found the survey quite interesting. You know, it's not a scientific survey. It's a sort of a poll of people. Still very interesting. And I wonder, Corey, what the, based on some of the questions, some of the responses, it would seem to me that some of the things that the public believes should be done can't actually yet be done in terms of, you know, infrastructure or, you know, budget cycles and whatnot. So is it just purely falling to council that if you know 98% of the public said they want ABC and then council receives that information and says, well, we can't afford it, but thank you, then I sometimes consider that, it's not a very nice phrase, but a bit of a setup for failure, that when you go out and ask the public, would you like a free kitten? There, most of them will say yes, but we don't have a plan for kittens, and we can't actually ever give everybody the kitten of their choice. And so we always need to be careful that it is really important to ask the public what their interest level is in various initiatives or aspects. But it also has to be understood that they may not necessarily be viable or achievable in a limited or certain time frame. But I think it's work toward future goals, but that it's not all happening by next year, I guess is the point. And so I hope people who did the survey realize that this is an ongoing conversation to get us somewhere, but that it's not immediate. It's all going to be next year's budget.
It won't be immediate enough for some people, that's for sure. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, and just another comment, which was on page 8, which is the proportion of respondents from the different 4 municipalities. And there was, you know, really good response from Dysart et al. And Algonquin Highlands, but not so well with Minden Hills and Highlands East. And you said there's going to be another survey in the fall. How can we best work with the municipalities to get a better representation of those, of all 4 municipalities? I mean, Algonquin Highlands and has great social media. I know Dysart works really hard on our social media posts, which is a good way to get information. So just keep that in mind. I'd love to see more respondents from the other 2 municipalities. Oh, and will what's different? What different questions, or what's the focus of the second survey?
Yeah, the next survey is more specific strategies and actions. So this first survey was a little bit more high level. And then the second survey will sort of take these themes and break them down into more specific actions and sort of what this looks like on the ground.
So would those specific questions that you're going to develop be general, or would some of them be geared more towards, you know, the interest that was shown in particular areas in the survey that you did this time?
Yeah, it would focus on the same theme areas. That's where the greenhouse gas emissions come from, as well as where we can sort of adapt and build resilience.
Any other questions for Corey? Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, what will we have Algonquin Highlands Council tomorrow, and I see that the latest set of minutes from the climate change group is on there. There were some suggestions or thoughts captured in that set of minutes that made me raise an eyebrow. Again, around the achievability. And what is the hope for marrying what that group wants or hopes for with the survey? Talk to me about where that will merge and then how it's handled going forward.
Yes, yeah. So there's sort of the 3 themes of community engagement, which is the advisory group, the community surveys, as well as stakeholder interviews with those organizations that work in these areas. So a lot of what the actions will be based on is municipal best practices. So things that have been done before that have been proved to be achievable, and then integrating community feedback on what that can look like locally. And that sort of informs then the short and long-term priorities within the plan.
Go ahead.
And again, I think stitching my 2 comments together, that and I can't remember specifically what it was on, I think it was around incentives, but a 25% rebate or incentive on something that municipalities should be doing or could be considering, which is in the minutes of that meeting. You know, that may not be achievable. And so is it your job then to say, that's a great thought, but it's probably not achievable, and move it from there? Or does it land just don't want council to end up being the bad guys for well-intentioned people seeking, the best outcome we can have as a community, but perhaps not knowing the inner machinations of municipal government and feeling they've been let down when things they wanted to see introduced or implemented aren't achievable. Like, I just want to make sure that all the parties work together within the achievable realm for the ultimate success where we can find it, knowing that in some places we might not be able to.
Yeah, so those minutes are ideas and feedback that came up, but not necessarily means that it will be translated into a final plan. So again, looking at feasibility as to what's been done elsewhere and how did that play out and how could we do that locally. So not every idea gets translated into a final plan.
Councillor Royale.
Yeah, I think that, the idea of getting a net zero by 2050 is an excellent idea, and there's no problem with that. Having said that, we're in 2022, so that leaves us roughly 28 years to accomplish that. Do I think we should take 28 years? Obviously not. But if we did use that as a fixed increment, we have 28 different things that we can now take baby steps towards. My big argument would be if we don't take the first one, followed immediately by the second one, and then the third one, then we're going to wait until the 48th. And then we're going to try to figure out how we're going to do it in 2 years, which is basically hurry up and slow down. And I really would like to see a lot more baby steps taken on a regular basis over the next 3 or 4 years. Because once you start getting into change, you kind of get okay with it. Like, you're a little afraid of it up front, but at the end of the day, it didn't hurt. Life was good. We moved on. So the baby step gets a little bit bigger. And so maybe 0.50 becomes 0.45 or 0.40. My point is, anything is better than today, regardless of what that number is.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just lastly, it's a different thing. It's to do with the electric vehicles and the questions around purchase, whether people would purchase electric vehicles and what were the barriers and whatnot. And as a county, we undertook, for local municipalities to partner with a business to have electric charging stations. And as Corey well knows, we still know, the Minden and Dysarts aren't working. And I know there's reasons behind it, but it's just really hard to get something like this off the ground when we know there's a desire for that. So I think we need reliable charging areas. Not everybody can do that at home. Maybe somehow encourage businesses. And I know, Corey, you're still looking into it, why the ones in Dysart is not active right now and why they're not up and running. But it's been frustrating. It's over 2 months. This is the peak of the summer. So we're getting complaints. We have this lovely little green standing thing looking by our welcome center, and doesn't work. So we need reliable charging stations. The grocery stores maybe need to implement and have charging stations. The other larger centers, I know one of the car dealerships is getting theirs up and going. So on a personal note, would I buy an electric vehicle? I didn't do the survey, unfortunately. I should have, but I don't know, because I don't know about reliable charging stations throughout the area. So I think we really need to take the initiative on that as well.
Well, and it seemed to me that there was also an issue when it was discovered that there were stations that didn't work, that the ones that didn't have the level of flow, and it took an extraordinarily long time for somebody to charge their vehicle. And so, yeah, we need to do some follow-up on that. Any more questions, though, on the actual survey and Corey's report? Anything you want to add, Steve?
No, I agree with the councillor's comments about baby steps. Certainly the charging stations, for example, is one. And yes, Corey and I are aware of that and trying to get the technical solution sooner than later on that one as well. So,
well, we look forward to you. Oh, Corey, you have further comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to add about the charging stations that what we're waiting on is the delivery of parts, or that's what the service provider is waiting on. So it's just very unfortunate timing with with supply chain issues, but we're on top of that and it will be resolved as soon as the parts can be delivered. Their team will be deployed to fix the stations.
Thanks for that. And we look forward to hearing your work as you go forward. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the survey? Councillor Roberts and Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 20th, 2022 staff report on climate action engagement results.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks to you both. Next on the agenda are administrative reports, and the first up is the correspondence summary. Is there any comment or desire to support any of the correspondence, Councillor Roberts?
I would like to support the municipality of Brighton's resolution regarding the Draven alert. The Board of Health is also pushing to support this as well, as it happened in City of Corsa Lakes. And the thought is that perhaps if there was an alert like this, that more people would be out, could have possibly prevented the fatal outcome, which was very sad. So it's for people who are vulnerable. So I would like to support that. See where that goes. There's a seconder.
Do we have a seconder on that?
If I may.
Okay.
Yes, that situation was tragic. There's no question. I guess my concern is, while I appreciate the intent of finding an opportunity to provide a different kind of assistance for vulnerable persons that might, I think you just said, that might get more people out looking, does that itself outweigh any challenges that might be incurred with people? The general public may not know the proper way to deal with vulnerable sector individuals, and could that just inflame the situation? Or is it, let's just get more people looking for the person and we'll deal with that later? I think they're very different things.
I think that it would just be get more people looking and for sighting and that it would be more localized. It wouldn't be the way Amber Alert. It doesn't matter if there's somebody missing in Sault Ste. Marie, our phones all go off, right? Because that's a different type of alert. So this would be, I think, the intention of it and the details of how it gets worked out is a lot farther down the road. And that's why I'd like to support it at this point before, it's just moving that one step closer to see what would be involved with that. But it would be more localized. And I'm not sure if it also, we've all heard stories of Alzheimer's people leaving their homes and that type of thing. So I'm not sure how much this would include, but I hope it would include that kind of thing. So to me, it's just moving it just one step closer.
So we have a seconder in Councillor Real. Do we have more questions? So you would add that to the resolution that we're supporting that?
So I have a separate resolution for that.
Okay.
So moved by Councillor Ryle, Roberts, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the June 20th, 2022 resolution from the municipality of Brighton regarding changes to the Amber Alert system to include a new alert called the Draven Alert, which will protect vulnerable children who are at high risk of danger, injury, or death, and alert the public that they are missing, and that staff be directed to forward a letter indicating council's support.
All in favor? That's carried. So then could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence summary listing? Councillors Moffat and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that the correspondence listing for the period of June 22nd, 2022 to July 7th, 2022 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next we have a three reports from Public Works. So would Robert be coming in? Good morning, Mr. Sutton. How are you today?
Good. Yourself, Warden?
Good, thanks.
Okay. And good morning, Council, as well.
So first up is your status report.
Yes.
Any highlights?
Just maybe to point out to council that things in construction are on schedule. There might be a couple optimistic dates in the completion column. Things have changed with some recent rain and some contractor scheduling, but everything's fairly on schedule and will be done quicker than last year. Maintenance is going well, and I think that's about it for now. I know it's a long agenda, so if there's any questions that council has on this report, please feel free to ask.
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, just quickly on the pavement markings, it's great to see nice bright lines on the road, except the crosswalk at Halbium and 21 was not done. So I don't know if that would have been included, but it's, you know, fairly new. So maybe it got, maybe the organization didn't know that that was theirs to do, or maybe it's done next year. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
No, thank you, Councillor, through the warden. They still have some minor items to complete. We'll definitely advise them of this. They are coming back to complete some of the road work that's still under construction for surface treatment. So this may have been missed, and we'll definitely advise them to get that done. It is planned to be done this year.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the status report? Councillor Burton, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that the July 2022 status report on capital projects, operations, and road maintenance be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your July rail trail status report.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the rail trail surface, we did complete a second application of dust suppressant this past week. We do find that it is working well so far. We are monitoring the situation. We are also planning to do some trial sections with our own staff later in August, just to try some things out to monitor as opposed to using contractors. So we are still on that rail trail surface issue that we're dealing with some compaction issues in certain areas. Regarding the rail trail detour, Minden Hills has closed Sedgwick Road and have started that work on the bridge. So it's in place, I believe, till the end of October, early November, depending on the schedule of Minden's contractor and the replacement of Sedgwick Road Bridge. There's also an update on the infrastructure, the ICIP, and our signing, as well as our other items related to that program. The government has recently notified us that they would like us to consult all the First Nations of the Williams Treaty Nations. And so we've started that, but we've also paused our work at their request, that the government's request, while we do that consultation. And the last item in the report is that we've got a good news story of cooperation between the ATV associations between Haliburton and Kawartha Lakes. They started some educational patrols. Kawartha has a program that's been up and running for a number of years. They've even been able to become a limited kind of bylaw officers this year within their area. So we've coordinated with our Haliburton and Kawartha Lakes to do those patrols, but only on an educational basis in Haliburton. That started July 1st, and we plan to continue it on for the year and come back to council if we're looking to do anything beyond that.
And any reports on the success or any issues associated with that?
No issues to date. Things have been going well that I've been hearing from the two presidents from the two ATV associations. We haven't heard any complaints as of yet. And I am also trying to be in contact with OPP to try and coordinate some issues there, but they've had some staffing changes. So that's delayed a little bit of those opportunities at this time.
Okay, any questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to accept the rail trail report? Councillor Kennedy and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report, July rail trail status report.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is the County Road 21 multi-use pathway extension and signalization at Industrial Road.
Yes, thank you, Warden. So further to some other reports, as well as some discussions at budget times, there was a grant that was applied for, is a joint venture between Dysart and the county back in the fall of 2020. It was awarded. Dysart is the lead for the grant, and the county's contributing. It was the original grant was for $200,000, $100,000 for each municipality to cover a multi-use pathway and a type B pedestrian crossing, similar to what Councillor Roberts was mentioning, that wasn't painted a halbium. Due to some concerns from staff at both the county and particularly the municipality, we had ACOM review their study from 2017 to update it and look at the industrial road intersection. They provided an updated recommendation to signalize the intersection as opposed to just a pedestrian crossing. The county has suggested that we'll cover the additional cost above the $200,000 grant, which is very preliminary, estimated at a total of $350,000. Currently, staff at Dysart have contacted the ministry with that scope change. We provided information in February and May. We're just waiting for final approval. And we wanted to bring this report to council before lame duck so that we could have the approval to proceed with a detailed design RFP once we get approval from the government. The financing that we've noted of $150,000 from possible roads reserve is kind of a worst case scenario, and we don't envision utilizing much of that this year. At year end, with corporate services and other adjustments, we expect to spend that money next year, and we'll address it further in the fall and through the budget 2023 development.
My only question with respect to this particular report is why the county would bear the sole responsibility for any costs over and above the original 200,000, as opposed to it being a shared cost, if it's a shared project.
Yes, Warden. The cost of signals are typically the county's responsibility. So that additional cost is being picked up by the county. I do believe that Mayor Roberts from Dysart has mentioned if costs increase greatly, there might be some ability for Dysart to help contribute. But further to the DC study that was spoken about this morning, the cost of signals are one of those items that are covered either through a DC that will be putting in place, but that won't cover this one. So it's just a standard kind of county cost to cover the cost of these signals.
Any questions or comments? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, and as I'll be outgoing, and Dysart will also be in lame duck. I can't commit Dysart to any funds, but we had said that because we've been talking about this for quite some time. It is an extremely busy intersection and will only get busier when the student residence is built and potentially a phase 3 of the industrial park is in the sights for Dysart in the future. It's already very difficult to pull out there with 2 lanes of traffic coming eastbound, and often 2 lanes, if you will. There's not really room for it, but coming out of industrial park, there's a lot of people that sort of sneak up to do that right turn while someone's waiting to do a left. So this is great for that area. It will also help calm traffic, I believe, because it's very hard sometimes even to get a break in traffic. I know that is my neighborhood, so it's a busy area, particularly in the summer. One question I have, which is regarding a private property, but that's on the corner that used to, when it was in operation, encroached onto the county road allowance, and that property has been sold, and we don't have a development on the table, but I just want to really ensure that the county marks off what the road allowance is. It's quite significant to make sure that the owner of that property is aware in any development that they don't interfere with where signals will go and all the infrastructure involved with that.
Yes, thank you. Through the warden to the councillor. Yes, part of the signals design assignment will be delineating the property limits, as well as there might be a hydro pole or 2 to be relocated. But the ultimate construction and design will have a barrier curb around the radiuses of both properties there. So that will help delineate, as well as maybe change accesses in there to make it as safe as possible. So there is a fair bit of work to do in that intersection, and you're correct. It it really deserves this work that's going to be planned for construction, hopefully next year.
Any other comments or concerns? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Councillors Roberts and Kennedy. Moffat, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report, County Road 21 multi-use pathway extension and signalization at Industrial Road. And further, that Haliburton County Council approved the proposed budget allocation as noted in the report.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Okay, next up are some reports with respect to our paramedic service. Good morning, Chief Waite.
Good morning, Warden, members of council.
So first up is your report on the paramedic service master plan.
Yes, I'll just keep it brief. We received the funding through the modernization funding of $101,760. We issued an RFP. We received one qualified bid to do the master plan, which is the emergency management group. They're slightly more over what we received in modernization funding, but we'll make up that difference in savings and other operating areas of our budget.
Are there any questions or concerns? Mr. CAO.
If I might just add one thing, there is a, as part of this project, we will be doing a community risk assessment that each of the local municipalities will be able to utilize in developing fire master plans if and when you decide to do that. So there's a real value add in this project for the local fire departments as well.
That's good. Any comments or questions then? So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the recommendation to go ahead with this work? Councillor Moffat, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 report on the Haliburton County Paramedic Service Master Plan RFP results, and that Haliburton County Council direct that the Haliburton County Paramedic Service Master Plan RFP be awarded to Emergency Management Group based on the terms outlined in their submission, and further that the fee for the project of $114,924 plus HST be funded from municipal modernization funding received for this purpose, with the remaining $13,164 plus applicable taxes to be funded from savings in other areas of the operating budget.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is your report on response times.
Yes, thank you, Warden. The next two reports sort of go hand in hand. I've been following for the first 6 months where we were standing with our response times, and I was quite pleased after I pulled the 6 month response times that we are meeting our targets in all CTAS levels, except we're slightly short in CTAS 1 by about 2%. But just keep in mind that these are difficult targets to make because sudden cardiac arrest is a 6-minute response and CTAS 1 is an 8-minute response. But the numbers are small, so one call over the response time target and one call under can make a big difference in meeting our target. So we were a bit behind in sudden cardiac arrests earlier in the year, but we've caught up. So we're looking fairly good so far this year.
Any questions on this report? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Roberts and Royale.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 20th, 2022 staff report for January 1st to June 30th, 2022 on response times for the Haliburton County Paramedic Service.
All in favor? That's carried. And finding your call volumes.
Yes, and this sort of goes, the reason call volumes can directly impact our response times. So I'm pleased our response times are where they are, because as you can see, we are significantly up in our call volumes. And when I look at April and May for our emergency responses being code 3s and 4s, they are significant, being 64% and 30% for April and May. So and overall call volumes are significantly up. So again, we expected them to rise with increased population in the area now, and they certainly have shown to greatly increased.
Any questions? Councillor Rao?
I know that this is probably a crystal ball question, but having said that, looks like we're growing on a regular basis. Every year seems to be getting more complex than the year before. Would it be safe to say that 23 will follow the same pattern?
I'm anticipating it will, yes. We may not see as dramatic increases as we're seeing this year, but I'm pretty certain that we'll just keep increasing.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the call volumes? Councillors Burton and Rao.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 20th, 2022 Haliburton County Paramedic Service Call Volume Report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Chief. Much appreciated. Good luck with your master plan. So next up, we have some Treasury reports to receive. So I think we bring in our Director of Corporate Services. Good morning.
Good morning, Warden and Council.
So first up is the check register.
Yes, our June check register totaled $1,737,554.97.
Any questions on the check register? Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Roberts and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the check register for June 2022, and further that Haliburton County Council hereby approves the check register for June 22 with checks, EFTs, and PAPs totaling $1,737,554.97.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the payroll register for June.
We had 2 pay periods in June with net direct deposits totaling $508,273.70.
Any questions? Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive that? Councillors Kennedy and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the payroll register for June 2022, and that the payroll register for June 2022 with net direct deposits totaling $508,273.70 be hereby approved.
All in favor? It's carried. Next is the year-to-date actuals report.
As at June 30th, 40.33% of operating expenses have been incurred and 7.69% of capital expenses incurred. As of the end of June, we should be approximately 50% spent. So we are currently reporting under budget.
That's good news. Any questions? Councillor Roberts?
Just because there's lots of numbers and I am looking on a little device and I did look at this at home, but is there anything you want to point out to us, particularly not the capital, because we know we get billed after the fact for road construction, but in the operating, is there something to highlight where we're under and why?
Not at this time. I think the majority is to staffing and not filling some of the positions when we had hoped to originally do that.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the year-to-date actuals? Councillors Burton and Roberts.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the year-to-date actuals as at June 30th, 2022, And further, that the year-to-date actuals as at June 30th, 2022 be hereby approved.
All in favor? It's carried. And finally, for you is the Infrastructure Ontario Debenture bylaw.
Yes, at the May 25th council meeting, council passed bylaw 4109, approving the submission of an application to Infrastructure Ontario for the long-term financing of the identified capital projects in my report. Our application has been approved and the interest rate secured at 4.24%. In order to proceed with the debenture process, Infrastructure Ontario requires bylaw 4118, which is included with the report, be approved and the supporting documents included within the report signed. The funds are scheduled to be advanced on August 2nd. The debenture has been set up with semi-annual payments, with our first payment due February 23rd, 2023. There is currently $365,000 included in the budget for principal and interest payments. So an additional $222,000 will need to be added to the 2023 budget for future payments. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions on that request? Should we just wait for a moment?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I can't hear you.
No, it's okay. We just had a little internal issue here.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Mr. Rutter.
If I might just say, because there's really no payments occurring in 2022, we will take the, or we'll recommend, I guess, to take the $365,000, and it will help us implement that in a phased in way. So again, that will lessen the impact potentially on the increase of $222,000 next year. So I think that that's a really good news story. It will help us implement that in a more phased in way than we'd anticipated. So could help with next year's budget.
Okay, that's good news. Any other questions about the debenture bylaw? I'm assuming that we have a resolution for the report and a separate resolution for the bylaw. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Kennedy and Roberts.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received for information the July 20th, 2022 staff report on the Infrastructure Ontario Debenture bylaw, that the Infrastructure Ontario Debenture bylaw report be approved, and further that staff be directed to present a bylaw authorizing the debenture.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. So next up are several tourism related reports.
I believe Tracy had intended to be here, but because of the length of the meeting, she's had to go to another meeting. So Scott will be presenting these reports.
Okay. Morning, Scott.
Good morning, Warren, members of council.
So the first report is a follow-up on the Tourism and Business Summit.
Yeah, we just wanted to provide just a brief summary on the day. It was really well received by the business community. We had over 80 attendees. And then moving forward, we're going to look to work with our community partners and host an event of a similar nature next year, just maybe on different topics and really just trying to kind of build continuity and collaboration within the business community throughout the county. And we'll look to try and also move it around for a location. Every year we do this annually, and happy to field any questions.
I've got to say, I was there for the day. I found that, attendance was great. The energy was really good. There was lots of good information brought to our business and tourism community. So, I really thought it was a good session. Any questions about this report? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I just attended at the beginning, at the morning, because I had something else on, but just like Warden Danielson said, there was quite an energy and, maybe coming out of COVID, like I say, we're not out of it completely yet, but certainly things are opening up and there was an excitement in the air. What was the sort of follow-up? Is it intended to be an annual thing, or is there something, what's the sort of follow-up thoughts?
Through you, Warden. Yeah, the goal is actually to make it an annual event. I think we're going to try and look at doing it a little bit earlier in the year, perhaps in March or April. There's been conversations even about trying to tie a job fair into that, hence why we'd be looking at doing it earlier in the year. But that's the goal, is to make it an annual event, something that our business community can come out to. The county can kind of share where we're at with various projects, as well as really trying to open our business community up to all the services that are provided, both locally and then just within Peterborough and Kawartha Lakes as well.
Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report on the business summit? Councillors Kennedy and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 report entitled 2022 Haliburton County Tourism and Business Summit Follow-up for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a report on the Regional Tourism Relief Fund.
Thank you, Warden. So we did bring a report to County Council in May, just outlining an application that we made to the Regional Tourism Relief Fund. We did hear back in early June from OTO that we were successful in receiving up to $50,000. Obviously, we didn't get the 96 that we originally asked for. The projects that we were funded for, I think, is a reflection both of the demand for the program as well as the priorities of the program, OTO, and subsequently the provincial government. So we received up to $25,000 to do a resident sentiment survey or program, as well as $25,000 or up to $25,000 for some marketing initiatives, content development, some product development or itinerary development as well. And then as well, just the last piece is the grant is 100% non-repayable. So the county isn't responsible for any funding contribution towards this, and happy to field any questions from council.
Any questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the report? Councillors Burton and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 report on the Regional Tourism Relief Fund funding agreement for information. Further, that the Warden and CAO be authorized to sign the non-repayable contribution agreement with Ontario Highlands Tourism Organization.
All in favor? Thank you, Scott. I understand you're going to be starting to tour the municipal councils and update them on your plans going forward. So we look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you very much, Warden.
So next is the report on the recruitment of an integrity commissioner. Would you be providing that report?
Yes, I will. You'll recall that 4 years ago, we went through a process of recruiting an integrity commissioner. We have worked over the last, our initial contract with Harold Elston over the last 4 years was a 2-year original term with a 2-year extension, which we did take advantage of. In consultation with the local clerks, we are recommending that we once again go out to advertisement for an integrity commissioner, and basically we would post an ad, interview based on criteria that I've outlined in the report, and then make a recommendation, which would ultimately be to the new council in November, and then so that the agreements could be in place by January 1st, 2023.
Any questions or concerns about that? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Councillors Roberts and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 20th, 2022 staff report on the recruitment of an integrity commissioner, and that staff be directed to work with all local municipalities within the county who wish to collaborate on this initiative to invite expressions of interest for these services, interview prospective service providers, and prepare a recommendation for all participating councils.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a request for financial support to repair the county cairn.
So the county cairn here in Minden did require significant repairs over the last year. The Legion branch undertook those repairs and have now asked that the county, I guess, provide a financial contribution for those. I've attached the request for funding, which includes the amount that it costs to do the repairs. I guess I did check back and with the Legion and was provide assurances that there were no grants or anything received from any other individual or organization for the work.
Any comments or questions about that? Councillor Kennedy.
Yeah, I think we should support this request for the full amount, $43.50. It is the county cairn, even though there may not be documentation to support that, but in fact, it is viewed as that. So I would fully support moving forward with the full payment.
Okay, any Councillor Ryle? Oh, okay, that I wasn't actually a mover, but Councillor Burton.
And I certainly support it as well, but I guess the question to Mike, and I didn't see it in the report and I probably missed it. Was there just the one quote, Mike, or have they had a couple?
I wasn't involved at that stage, so I don't know. But I can't answer that question because I wasn't involved at that stage.
I don't think there's any question about our level of support to repair the cairn. It's just kind of unfortunate it didn't come to us in a little bit different order, but could I have a mover and a seconder to approve this request? Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report regarding the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 636 County Cairn request for financial support, and that Haliburton County Council approve a contribution of $4,350.50 towards the cost of repairs to the county cairn.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the NG 911 Authority Service Agreement. Who is speaking to that?
That would be me. Lesson learned in all of this, never present a report like this that after you're coming back from holidays. This is a really complicated one. So I guess in 2004, the county was delegated the authority to enter into an agreement for 911 call answering, essentially. The CRTC has mandated that all those companies involved in this process update to a next generation 911 network before March of 2023. In order to do that, we need to enter into an agreement with Bell, which I have attached to this staff report. I would say that I and I believe other staff participated in a webinar with Bell, and there isn't really any opportunity. I would say there is no opportunity to incorporate any changes or amendments to this agreement. It's kind of a take it or leave it deal. Having said that, they are bearing all the expense and upgrading all of the technology. Subsequent to that, if you can think of the 911 call process, you call 911 and it goes to, in our case, Northern 911. And then they ask if you want police, fire, ambulance, and then it is subsequently dispatched to a secondary PSAP or dispatch center. So we have checked Northern 911 would like to begin the transition process right away. And in order to do that, they need us to have entered into this agreement with Bell. And then we checked on behalf of the local municipalities with all of the secondary PSAPs. So all of the dispatches for your fire departments, for all police and for ambulance as well. And all have committed to making the transition to NG 911 and doing what it takes by the deadline, which is again in May 2025, March 2025. I guess the one caveat to all of that is, for some of them, they weren't able to give us a definitive answer on when they would make the transition. And so in our conversations with your local staff, I think everyone understands that if for whatever reason, one of the dispatches has challenges and decides it's not worth the transition or it's not worth the investment required to make the transition, then you would be required to find a new provider for those dispatch services. But there are a number out there, as you can see. So I guess that risk is there, but at this point, everyone has committed to making the transition, even if they weren't able to give us a definite deadline or definite timeline. We're told that there will be no direct cost to the county for this transition, and that the indirect costs resulting from investments required by the primary and secondary PSAPs are very difficult to estimate at this point because they would be found in your monthly bills or your annual bills to those as well. So we're not sure. In our conversations with Northern 911, they've said they don't anticipate them to be substantial, but again, we really can't quantify those at this point.
Any questions or concerns? Doesn't sound like we have much choice.
Long story to say that.
So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? And there is a separate bylaw to approve this. Councillor Moffat and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report on the NG 911 Authority Service Agreement, that Haliburton County Council agreed to enter into the NG 911 Authority Service Agreement with Bell Canada attached to this report, and that staff be directed to present a bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to execute that agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is a request to raise the progressive pride flag.
Yes, so you'll see attached to my staff report a request that we received from Stephen Hurtle for that the progressive pride flag be raised at the county administration building. Historically, the county hasn't done proclamations or flown flags to recognize significant events or celebrations. It's been left to the local municipalities, and that allowed for some individuality. But over the last year, we've certainly applied that less strictly as we flew flags to recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and in support of Ukraine and their war against Russia. So when we received this, we did speak to the local CAOs because when we've encountered those other days like National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and we've all had conversations and who's doing what. And so we thought this was an opportunity to review those policies in detail and try and come up with something that is consistent across the board. Having said that, there's no way that review can take place in August when this community celebrates Pride. So we, council could opt to provide direction that the flag be flown in August pending the full policy development.
So as Mike said, this is like a two-part thing that we need to make a decision about whether or not we want to approve the flag raising for August. And obviously, I think it's time for us to take a look at what our flag policy says and to reflect on whether there should be any changes there. So I look to members for thoughts.
Certainly fly the pride flag, absolutely. And I mean, I hesitate around looking at the policy around the flag, and I'll tell you why. Is that very often accompanied with the flag raising is the expectation or the request that councillors attend to be part of it. And if people are busy or they can't attend, sometimes that disappoints folks. And again, using the same phrase, sort of a setup for failure. So how would a policy be crafted that, other than relying on the good graces of people to understand that they may request members of council attend, to assist or be present for the flag raising, but they can't get them. And then that's that's a billable expense. And so some councillors would be driving from, big distances. It could be argued very easily that, come on, to support something that's worthy a few bucks for mileage shouldn't matter. But there are others who would say, we need to spend money on different things. So I know it sounds like a little tiny issue that a little tiny scab I'm picking at. But certainly there is often an expectation for a big group of people to smile when the flag's being raised. And I don't object to that at all. It's just the being able to be there on call, coming from, it's an hour for Highlands East, it's over an hour for Councillor Dayu if she was ever requested for something, that's my only concern, but I think it's worth looking at it if that can be managed somehow.
But I see a bit of a difference between us flying the flag for the month of August here and the official flag raising, during their celebrations. And that's, I think, what you're referring to when it comes to attendance, right?
Yeah, I am. But if you'll recall in the past, I know as mayor, I get emails all the time asking the township of Algonquin Highlands to declare, the month of whatever. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but support for
rescue.
Yes, support for single parents with it doesn't matter. And there's a lot of causes and there's a lot of requests. There has been historically a lot of requests to raise flags, and CARP, they do a good job and represent a ton of important people in our community. And we have repeatedly been requested to turn up to share in the flag raising. So I don't mind flying flags if there's a policy within which it's determined that flags can be flown to recognize something of value. I think there needs to be a different conversation about the expectation of council member attendance to come in from disparate places in the community. This is not about the pride flag. The pride flag raising happens at Minden, just down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the flag policy, remember that there are often requests, not only to fly the flag, which is fine by me, but for people to drive in and stand for a picture for 10 minutes. So I just think that needs to be considered.
Okay, Councillor Rao.
I think Councillor Moffat is absolutely right, but then we also have the situation where, unfortunately, we have to lower flags at half-mast on periodic occasions for very stout reasons. I don't think we all show up for that either, and it's a whole point of honoring and respecting whatever the reason is for the flag being raised. And I don't think it diminishes our respect or honor for the flag by the fact that there may not necessarily be a council representation there. The fact that we're doing it implies that we have respect and honor for that particular organization, or in the case of a lowering, a particular individual was. So I'm not as worried about it, and I don't think it would be disrespect by having the flag raised, but without having council there.
Well, I think the individual flag policies address both aspects of both raising and lowering flags.
If I may, that's I'm not going to say that's the perfect answer, but that's the kind of conversation that needs to occur. Is I agree with you that it just people not showing up is not a sign of disrespect. It just might be not possible, and I just wouldn't want us to disappoint people who may expect it and not get it. That's all. People are funny. They, when people have something they're very passionate about or they believe in, and they want other people to join in that. And if people can't for whatever reason, it needs to be clearly understood that it's, as Cisa said, it's not about disrespect. It's about calendars and timetables. That's all.
Well, another thing that came to my mind, and it's just something that would need to be considered as part of the policy, is when you talk about raising the appropriate flags, was the term that you used, and like, what's the determination of what's appropriate and what's not? Where's the line? Councillor Roberts.
So I definitely support the pride flag being raised because of the time frame, but I do think that we need to develop a policy around the criteria, if you will, for even receiving the requests for when a flag would be raised. And it could be something as simple as, say it's an annual thing and they want like pride. Then once county councils approved it, that just next year you don't have to go back through this process. So
It can go to staff.
We don't have a policy in front of us to debate, but I think we need to look at a policy, whether it comes to a future council. But definitely let's get the pride flag up and create a policy that can then be debated.
So I'm hearing a two-part resolution.
Yep.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then to, first of all, to raise the flag, and second of all, to have a review of our policy? Councillors Roberts and Burton.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report regarding a request to raise the progressive pride flag, that staff be directed to fly the progressive pride flag in August 2022, and that staff be directed to work with local municipal staff to review flag policies with a review to develop a consistent approach throughout the county.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, finally, under administrative reports, the report on fee for service for the agreement between the county and ULinks.
Yeah, so as requested, ULinks provided a very detailed work plan and budget and scope of work. I have done, I've incorporated some changes or made some changes to an existing agreement that is sort of a template that we use for a fee for service arrangement. That may be why you may look at some of them and think, I'm just not sure why that makes sense, but it really is an amended or a version that's been adjusted to try and fit the circumstances. So this agreement would go for until the final reports were presented, just to make sure that any liabilities are covered for the entire time, but the payment of $35,000 plus HST would occur in the 2022 budget year.
Questions, comments, concerns? Councillor Moffat.
I'm quickly scrolling through to try and I scribbled something down on a different page. We had talked about the need for there being a repository of data that could be accessed by others, and I can't remember, with apologies, if it's in here. I know it talks about making information available and reporting, but I'm talking about, I think that was more about you know, the ULinks has the, you know, I think it's, I call it the gray literature collection, and there's a whole database of previous reports and things and studies that have been done that are publicly available. And I'm just looking for, where will the results of this live there, or where does the data live, and how will other organizations be able to use it? Because we wanted to make sure that in support of this program, that it was also a baseline or a benchmark, perhaps is better, that of the data and the outcomes that could be used, built upon, extended. And I just scroll.
I'm scrolling too, but all ULinks reports are publicly available, so I assume this would be as well. And certainly if once it's reported to Haliburton County Council, then it becomes a public document. Yeah.
I'm speaking more of data than documents. Of course, the documents will be available because we would get copies of them. I mean, I think a lot of the conversation, well, I mean, it's referenced, you know, I've asked for it to be on the agenda, and it is later on about, you know, the bigger development of a different body. And we just need to make sure that the data, of which I know very little, to be honest, just want to make sure that it doesn't become a standalone isolated outcome, and that the process, the data, the, you know, recommendations or whatever they might be aren't entrenched in a PDF somewhere that you can't break open. I'm not looking for a recipe, I'm looking for ingredients, if that makes any sense. So how do we make sure that the pieces of this process become available for others to use should they need them in the future? Or perhaps that already is, and I just don't see that.
Well, I can confirm that with the with Ulinks to make sure that they know that's our expectation, or that that's the county's expectation, but
Oh, sorry, I found it.
okay.
The data, the actual data collected, that we will be collaborating with the Gordon Foundation, which Mr. Gordon said was not his family, to make the data readily available to the public, including the county, through their data stream platform. Thank you.
Yes, that.
That.
Well done.
Scroll. I mean, I knew it was there somewhere.
Okay, so any other questions or concerns about the agreement? Could I have a mover and a seconder to accept this report? Move forward. Councillors Moffat and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. We have resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 staff report presenting a draft fee for service agreement with Ulinks Center for Community-Based Research to undertake a water quality testing pilot project, that Haliburton County Council approve the agreement as presented, and that staff be directed to present a bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to execute the agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, I just want to have a quick go around the table about the timing. We've still got a number of items that need to be discussed. I don't think that we've done anything about lunch, have we?
Lunch is here.
What I was sort of thinking is if we could try and sail through some of this information and maybe have lunch during the closed session portion, that would work and help expedite things, if that sounds okay. All right. So under reports and minutes from external boards and agencies, anything that you wish to bring forward from the health unit?
No, we don't meet in the summertime, so I'll wait till there's minutes on that. But we don't meet, they work hard.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, thank you for that. Under point in time, Councillor Shell is not here. On the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, we had a meeting last week in Cornwall. Got to say, the drive to and from Cornwall is extraordinary, especially it's long, but if you go across country, it's beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful. So I think one of the biggest things that I'd like to report is that the Wardens Caucus has a new big idea, and it's a very big idea. And the CAOs discussed and pitched to the Wardens Caucus the idea of an Eastern Ontario regional housing network that they would like to pitch to the province at our multi-ministers forum next month. The idea that we would look to both the feds, the province, and the municipalities to partner on housing and certain housing targets across Eastern Ontario. EORN has proved that they've got the skills and the history of managing a project of this magnitude. It would be run in a similar way, not necessarily by the same people, but maybe by the same people. So everyone was in complete agreement to move forward with this. You know, we've all set housing as an absolute top priority at all levels of government, and this is something that that we're really hoping that they will receive well, and we can move forward with. There's lots of work and time involved, but I think this might help us. So that was the biggest item. We also got a report on, I've spoken previously about a project that there's a committee that's been set up especially to work with the Regional Ontario, the Rural Ontario Institute to develop a sort of toolkit for municipalities, developers, builders to use for housing projects. And they've been doing some testing on that toolkit in certain areas, and we'll be presenting that to the province next month. Hopefully that, we'll see some success on that. We heard from the Leadership Council that they are going to be working in conjunction with Good Roads on a sort of a one permit system specific to oversized loads crossing different territories. So that's kind of an interesting project that they're working on. We don't have a lot of details about that. They're also looking at, as a separate project, looking at the gaps and supply of labor force, kind of across Eastern Ontario, and we'll be continuing to work on that. The CAOs from the different counties will be meeting in September with a consultant to talk about regional economic development. And the Leadership Council is also working on a procurement policy for items like innovation and the circular economy. We did get a report from EORN, and basically it sounds like their projects are on target for the most part. As far as the construction sites, they've had some delays with the consultation process with Indigenous groups about the sites for some of the work that was being done, and that's moving ahead and has been successful. There was a question about whether or not the Rogers outage had any, there's not anything that we needed to worry about with respect to their ongoing project right now, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any impact on that work, but there was some Rogers is kind of got their head down a deep hole trying to sort out what their problem is. And so there wasn't an awful lot of information there. And I think, for the most part, that covers the business at hand. There was an awful lot of time spent on the housing issue. And, if anybody wants any more information about that, I'm a phone call away. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I think the housing initiative is really exciting because we know the needs, we know the challenges, and I don't want to say we're powerless, but it's almost like, where do you start? How do you eat this elephant? And while we're trying to figure out how to eat the elephant because of the resource challenges and costs, people are still couch surfing and having really significant challenges with housing. So the home builders recently had a speaker at their last meeting about housing, and I can't remember who the speaker was, but because they're taking an active role in it, I wonder if we can just make the effort to get them up to speed on this. Because once again, I seem to have this thing in my head about everyone's going off in different directions, that if we're all trying to get to the same place, let's try and do it together. And if the ROI has a template or a toolkit, then that might be helpful for the home builders to know in relation to their latest speaker.
They in fact have been in touch with the different home builders groups,
good. Okay,
the chambers of commerce, and
Excellent.
pretty much anybody who's been associated. But I'll make sure that information is passed on. But I'm sure that they're already in that particular loop. The only thing I wanted to add about the housing project is because it was like a 3P partnership, and the dollars that were estimated were extraordinary. So they were looking for the municipal portion as sort of being another toolbox, like if we've got land that we can contribute, or there's different ways for us to contribute in lieu. And that would be sort of what's being proposed for the municipality. And of course, there's dollars involved, but there's also other incentives that can be used. It's all to be fleshed out. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. And I commend you for even try to take on this huge issue. But I believe, was it the thing that we listened online, like baby needs a home or something like that? The statistics were incredible. So we all think, oh, COVID caused this. But no, it's long before that. And there was a lot of statistics in that report that we listened to online that in dollars and what it's going to take, between immigration and just regular and growth and students coming from other countries wanting to learn here. So temporary, like it's a big issue. Yeah. So
well, it's a huge issue, and we all know this is not caused by COVID. I mean, it's been exacerbated by it, but it's been creeping up on us. How long have we been hearing about 5-year wait lists for homeless or people that have low income families? And this project is primarily geared towards low income, geared to income. There would be a percentage of regular housing, but it is geared more to the low income portion. Councillor Al.
Would it be something that would be kind of like, I realize not the same group, but it'd be something similar to what EORN has done for the networking program?
Yes,
Yeah, that's the model.
exactly. That's the model that they're using. And it actually was the EORN group that, and working with the CAOs that have pitched it to us. So
Well,
it's the exact same model that I mean, obviously there's going to be some differences, but
Yeah, I'm just looking at the progress that's been made through that group. And if we had one similar to it for housing, I mean,
the trick is getting the
awesome.
other levels of government to agree to move forward with it. And they will be working really hard over the next little while to get a presentation made ready for AIM.
well, thank you very much and great news.
Mhm. Okay, and next is joint social housing, and Councillor DeVolen is not here. I don't think there's anything on professional recruitment other than what we will be talking about later. Anything that you wanted to bring to our attention about the library board?
Just the CEO of our library sends out these little Friday reports to
They're
board
fabulous.
members. And aren't they just great? They really are keeping board members involved and highlighted and knowing who the staff are and specifically what they're doing. Like, it's really helped. And I've been on the library board for like 2 terms now. So but it's even opening my eyes to the services and programs we offer. So I just want to shout out to the Friday update. He created a monster, but now I expect it on Friday. Where's the, yes, it's great.
It is great information. I mean, and this is my 3rd term on the library board, and it's I'm definitely finding out more information than we ever had before. Okay, we do have the land division. Welcome back, Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Madam Warden, to the rest of council. So this is a standard report that we do every month after we've had a successful committee meeting. And you'll note that it was a fairly busy night. The committee handled it well. We had one controversial file that had a fair bit of public input, but at the end of the day, all the applications were approved. Towards the end of the report, you'll note the makeup of the consents that were approved. 7 lot additions and 3 lots, 2 of them being shoreline, were approved. So thank you very much.
Any questions on the land division report? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Councillors Moffat and Kennedy.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received the July 20th, 2022 report entitled Land Division Activity Report for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Other external boards and agencies, any updates from Good Roads?
No.
Okay. And Councillor DeVolen is not here for any update from EORN, nor give us any information on poverty reduction roundtable. So into other business, are there any errors or omissions noted on the August calendar? Well, then we will move to a discussion on the possible creation of an Upper Trent Watershed Council. And this is something that Councillor Moffat is of extreme interest to her and wants to, kind of try and set the stage for how we might move forward. So over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to circle back, and I will keep circling back. I think given the enthusiasm with which the Muskoka Watershed Council presentations have been received, it's evident that there's a tremendous value and merit in that model. Given the various challenges that we have and are experiencing, we keep talking about who do we fund and is it fee for service, and I, again, have said before, believe that there's a tremendous opportunity to bring together various groups that are doing good work, but are doing them by themselves and put them in the same place. Now, it doesn't mean that if and it's Upper Trent because it's Haliburton County and the 2 municipalities to the south that are in where are they? Trent Lakes and North Kawartha. Apologies to my friends there. And I just think that there's already so much work that has been done and work that is being done that deserves to be consolidated into a bit of a think tank. And the Muskoka Watershed Council has been in existence for a long time. It's worked very hard to get where it is. So it's kind of like seeing a finished product and not realizing that the building blocks are way in a different direction. And I'm looking for, council has sort of nodded in general support when I've raised this. I raised it in 2019, and we talked about folding in fisheries. Like if you think about, and I still have that list because I keep everything. There are so many things that are affecting the broader scope of the community that could be addressed in terms of the environment and what happens in the watershed. Look at the responses to the climate change survey, which Madam Warden, you noted yourself. I think there's a way to bring them all together into one place. And I'm not trying to suggest that there'd be some board that has 80 people on it who would just, a horse created by a committee is often a camel. I would just like, and whether council thinks about it, we talk about it later, or today says, you're out of your mind, forget it. But I think this county has grown and matured enough that it deserves something of this magnitude and something that takes the responsibility of consolidating the good work of others and putting it in one place and seeing what it looks like. I appreciate the comment maybe that we can't bind a future council, but we actually in certain ways do it all the time. I know that they're captured in budget decisions. So if we decide something in a budget and it's permanent, in theory, you're binding a future council. So we can argue the thin edge of the wedge on that. But I would just like to know if this council's interested in trying to put a framework together. So at least the groundwork's done. I don't know who would do it. Anyway, I think this is one of the most exciting opportunities we've had in the face of the challenges we are experiencing that this county has had in a long time. And I would like to see some commitment to a discussion. You can discuss it and sketch it out and go, it doesn't work. Or maybe it does work. Or you can, but at least if it doesn't work, you get to say that you framed it out and you discussed it and we can't make it work. But then it's something on a shelf, I hate to say, for the future. But I'm looking, I'll be very frank, I'm looking for county council support in, I don't know what, in some conversation that lays the groundwork for a watershed-wide council to address the very serious environmental and ecological, economic challenges we're facing. That's the end of my off the top of my head speech.
Well, you know what, we've heard so much that's kind of leading us in this direction. And I can't agree enough that this might be an extremely good thing for us to do, beneficial in so many ways, and to give us a little bit more autonomy. We seem to be tagging on to a lot of different groups, and it'd be nice to be able to bring it together for this area. I'm a little bit concerned, as you did mention the thought of committing a future council to something, but I do see that there might be a benefit, and council can weigh in on this in maybe before our term is done, having a discussion, kind of putting our heads together about this particular issue and just kind of thinking about how it might work. I mean, I don't want to I don't want to commit staff to too much additional work, because right now I think everybody's like right up to over their eyeballs in work and responsibility. But I'd sure like to hear what other members of council think, what ideas they might have about how we could move forward with this. Councillor Kennedy.
Way to go, Councillor Moffat, for bringing this back up again. I was a little bit surprised when you made a good explanation when the creation of a Haliburton County Watershed Council rather than you're proposing an Upper Trent, but it makes perfect sense now when you speak to it. I sort of envisioned when I saw this about the discussion was we need to pull the people together. So kind of the summit, what was done with the tourism initiative at Sir Sam's this past spring might be the way to start, where we make the invitation out to the different organizations that we think should be involved, and then just have that almost a similar format, and then move forward from there. And I'll donate my time before, during, and after council. So I fully support it.
Councillor Burton.
And I certainly agree, and thank you for bringing it up. I would certainly support and entertain an idea of getting all the groups together that we possibly can and just pick a spot and do it. I don't know. I suppose we're looking at the chair. to do that.
Well,
but,
I'm just wondering about, whether we want to, how best to do this, whether we call a special meeting to talk about this, or whether we sort of assign a little bit of a working group to identify, who might be involved, what process we might, follow. Because right now it's like really big picture thinking. Councillor Moffat.
I think Councillor Kennedy has a good idea. Is you invite the people you hope would be interested in participating, and then you invite the gentleman from the Muskoka Watershed Council to explain it all. And that's the person who says, grasshopper, we were once where you were, and this is how it builds.
And he's offered to do exactly that.
Yes, they do tremendous work, but they didn't start there. They started by somebody saying, let's get those folks and those folks together and have a chinwag about how to work better together on a thing. That's probably how that started. That's how all the good things start. And that's what we could do.
Well, you probably have the best idea about exactly who should be involved in that discussion.
We've identified them all in our various conversations, and some are in my creepy notebook. There's probably all kinds of, we could probably say off the top of our head who initially, and if somebody isn't invited and they are offended, they can come next time. It's not exclusionary. It's meant to it's a starting point.
Get things moving.
Where will it get by the end of the term? It might get to a point where people say this is something a conversation that must be continued next term. That's kind of where I want it to get, is everyone says yay, and the commitment is to carry it on in the next term.
Councillor Ryle and then Councillor Roberts.
I totally agree. I mean, the timing is kind of wrong for Haliburton County to charge ahead and do things, because we don't know what everybody else is doing. But I think if we wait and don't do anything, the idea here, if I'm hearing correctly, is just to have some kind of a summit meeting to see if there's enough general interest amongst all of the groups. And the perimeter of how far we go is, I think Councillor Moffat would probably have a better handle on that, considering the amount of passion that she has into it. But it would let us know, is it something we should be pursuing with the right partners coming into the next term? And why would we have to wait to find that information out? It doesn't make any sense to me. We could find that out as soon as we can.
Councillor Roberts.
Yes, I think it certainly sounds like there's support around this table to investigate it. And I think with the knowledge and the history and the corporate knowledge and all of that, your experience, Councillor Moffat, for you to sort of take the lead on this. But if Councillor Kennedy also wants to be involved, could, with council's blessing, 2 councillors are not a quorum, continue on in this process, talk to the gentleman, can't remember the name, from Muskoka Watershed Council, and come back and do a bit of a written report back to this council. Perhaps, I don't know whenever that could happen, depending, in August or September council meeting or committee of the whole, whichever. And then we can have a little deeper conversation. But if we give our blessing for 2 councillors to go off and do more investigation, that is like a subcommittee or a working group, I would support that.
But that's not exactly what I was hearing. I was hearing that we would literally bring a larger group of people together, including all of us, and to hear from the Muskoka Watershed Council, as opposed to waiting. So you tell me what it is, how you see it moving forward.
I mean, how I see it is not necessarily how it should be. I was thinking more along the lines of what Councillor Roberts is saying, is somebody has to go and do the work. Somebody has to call CEWF and CHA and ULinks and who else. So we don't need all of us to brainstorm. And then it's whether that comes back to council to say, this is the group we'd like to invite. How far does it go? Outdoors Association, we have to go back to that, the list, which is in 2 notebooks ago, and find out who it is. And then if there is the summit idea to be held, it is held at a place, and anybody can go. You wouldn't invite all those people to a council meeting. You'd have a meeting to which members of council could attend to hear it if they wanted to, I guess. But you don't, with all due respect, you don't need 7 or 8 people trying to organize a group of people for a meeting.
No, I just wanted to ensure that, if there was going to be a presentation made by the Watershed Council people, the Muskoka Watershed Council people, that everybody would be able to attend. and
Absolutely,
listen and be-
absolutely.
You know, that's,
It would be my intention, it would be my intention, I shouldn't say that, that was the wrong word, expectation that it would be something that even persons would be interested in. But this is the Watershed Council, you have to, like creating anything, there has to be a decision made somewhere by some body of persons that says who populates those seats. It's only like terms of reference. So, you know, would there, and I'm way down in the weeds now, are there 2 public spots and the other ones are organizational based on? And what if an organization says we don't want to be in Watershed Council? What do you do then? And I think there's so much good work done over many years in Haliburton County by really good people in separate groups, but the county needs to, you know, with short-term rentals and shoreline bylaw and development charges, we're growing up really quickly. And I think that the county needs to really invest in some ownership around some of these really important issues because they're all related. So I think the county has to own it. I don't mean that to sound in a creepy controlling way, but I think there's a place for everybody. We just need to figure out how many seats there are. But that's way down the road.
cease. Sorry, Councillor Rao.
Yeah, I like what you're proposing, and if both of you guys believe and have enough passion in it to do the due diligence required, I think you should go ahead and do it if it's possible. If we could have some kind of a meeting, conference, the name really doesn't matter. We're getting a good group of people together to decide if there's further direction that we can go into and have that accomplished in 2022. I think the best thing we can do is get out of your way and support you on making that happen.
Are you councillors Kennedy and Moffat willing to take the lead, work with our CAO? You know, I'm not sure, like what Andrea is suggesting or Councillor Roberts is suggesting is that that maybe, you know, you put your heads together and maybe come back to our next meeting and say, here, look,
Yeah.
this is kind of how we see this flowing out. And we can go further from that. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, do we need to have a resolution or we just kind of got direction to?
Well, I think maybe the staff report that will come out of this will, I mean, I've drafted a resolution. Well, I'll read what I have anyway. Be it resolved, so I guess we're having a resolution. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council direct councillors Moffat and Kennedy to work with staff to organize a summit of interested organizations where a representative of the Muskoka Watershed Council is invited to present on the mandate and evolution of their organization, and that this summit be held prior to the end of this term of council.
You didn't just write that now, did you? Oh my God.
A mover? Councillor Moffat?
Can I move that? Because I'm in it?
Yes, yes. Well, sure. Oh, Councillor Roberts.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor? Carried.
If I may, Madam Ward, just thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Through to Carol. Do you remember us having, I'm not going to call it a summit at Kinmount, over much the same thing?
Yeah.
I'd like you to
Yes, I do.
I'd like you to see if you can find your records on that.
I probably have them and I'll call Barry DeVolen because he was
Because
there.
I imagine the
Barry
groups,
DeVolen.
the groups would be all there.
Excellent. Okay, so we are now about to go into closed session. Could I have a mover and a seconder to go into closed? Councillor Ryle, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council enter into closed session for the following reasons: personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose.
All in favor? That's carried. For the County of Haliburton. We talked about this in the past. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Roberts, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that bylaw 4117, being a bylaw to appoint deputy chief administrative officers for the corporation of the county of Haliburton, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. The second to authorize the borrowing on serial debentures. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that bylaw 4118, being a bylaw to authorize the borrowing upon serial debentures in the principal amount of $4,152,931 towards the cost of the Drag River Bridge, York River Bridge, Dark Lake Bridge, Lower Cup Lake Culvert, and County Road 16 culverts, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? The next is a bylaw to authorize the next gen agreement with Bell Canada. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Roberts.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that bylaw 4119, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a next generation 911 agreement with Bell Canada, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a bylaw to authorize the execution of a fee-for-service agreement with Ulinks. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Kennedy and Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that bylaw 4120, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a fee-for-service agreement with Ulinks Center for Community-Based Research for a water quality monitoring program for Haliburton County, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? It's carried. Is there any notice of motions? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that bylaw 4121, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the July 20th, 2022 meeting of Haliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Councillor Kennedy, Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the July 20th, 2022 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried. And that went longer than I think we had